Property bears love a market downturn. They'll often be heard predicting that Australian property prices will fall 40%. And when pushed on why they think this is going to happen, many refer to what happened in the American property market back in 2008 to 2011 as a warning sign of what can happen here. Yet, there are some significant structural differences between the two markets. In the main, we don't have non-recourse lending and our regulations have always been tighter than in the US. But am I being blinded by my own property bias? Are we at risk of a major crash? Welcome to The Elephant in the Room. This is the podcast where we love to talk about the big things in property that never usually get talked about. I'm Veronica Morgan, real estate agent, buyer's agent and buyer's agent mentor, co-host of Foxtel's Location Australia, author of Auction Ready and co-host of Your First Home Buyer Guide.
And I'm Chris Bates, mortgage broker, recently ranked number 5 in Australia out of over 18,000 brokers in the annual MPA Top 100 Mortgage Broker Awards. Before we get started, I need to let you know that nothing we say here can be taken as personal advice. We always recommend you engage the services of an appropriate and experienced professional.
Recently, I've been listening to some American property podcasts and I've become a bit of a fan of David Sidoni's How to Buy a Home, which he started back in 2019 because he was sick and tired, to quote him, of seeing first home buyers being treated like garbage by the real estate industry. Now, he kept seeing them being passed over by experienced realtors, that's what they called over there, not real estate agents, and used as guinea pigs for brand new agents to get their feet wet and learn how to be realtors. On his podcast, he peels back the curtain for first home buyers and lets them know the insider secrets on how to find the rare professionals that would give them the service they deserve. He's also a bit of a numbers man and, like us really, likes to go on a bit of a rant. After hearing his explanation of how lending regulations have tightened in that country since the GFC, I thought a bit of a history lesson and a comparison of the two markets would be really great for our listeners. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to Australia. Great to meet you.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. And yes, the big difference is that we call them realtors, and God knows why we call them first-time buyers. But now I catch myself on my show because I listen to yours so much, calling them first home buyers. I love it.
David, Veronica and I always just have chats on, certain conversations we think would be valuable, right? And the US conversation's definitely been on our list, right? Because I think it's important to get a global perspective. And the global story is always changing, in particular now, the US markets and interest rates. And so it's quite topical to discuss that. But I think we should go back before we sort of go forward. And I think maybe we go back to the dark days of the credit. Would you call it a credit crisis there? I mean, we called it a GFC in Australia, a great financial crisis. When I was actually living in the UK, it was called a credit crisis there. What did that come in? What they even called it in the US? It was a different name. So back to those days, what actually happened? Obviously, everyone's watched The Big Short and have an idea roughly what happened. But it'd be good to sort of see your on the ground experience and the learnings you took away from those days.
Well, I am uniquely qualified because I was there and went through it. And we did call it the Great Recession.
Right.
GFC is definitely an international term. If I don't know it, a gigantic real estate nerd, then in the US, then I'm pretty sure the general public doesn't. The Great Recession is the term that came with that, because you have to remember, and again, I've been spending a ton of time right now defending and explaining to people the difference between 2008 and what's happening right now in the US. And to do that, we have to do exactly what you talked about. Go back. So if you go back and look at the history, The Big Short explains it in the most phenomenal way. I also recommend The Margin Call if you want to get really deep into the weeds on it. But to understand the way the U.S. and the Great Recession that caused the global economy, yes, the housing market was the impetus to it, but the housing market started summer of 2007. October 2008 was Wall Street behind it. Now, what happened was the affordability of homes in 2007 got completely out of control because we had such ridiculously easy lending practices. So, the history behind it is went through the 90s recessions, and then in 98, I don't know what happened, but in 98, the lenders just started to release the guidelines. Government monetary policies in the U.S. changed a bit. The beginning of the artificial holding back and the quantitative easing that they were doing to artificially inflate where the GDP and where the economy in general was going helped keep the interest rates down. And I remember in 2006 when I was selling real estate where people would kiss me on the lips for a 6% rate. So that time frame of what happened back then. So in the US, the thing that was the most phenomenal was in 2005, we usually sell, like 4 to 5 million units a year. And like, if you look at the chart of how many homes are being sold, just volume of units sold, 2002, 3, and 4, we made these crazy jumps from like 3 to 4.5 to 5. And then everyone was like, oh my gosh, that's going crazy. And then in 2005, we sold 7.1 million homes, 7.1 million transactions, highest by far by like 30%. 40% of those were second homes.
But you also, so you had volumes going up, sales volumes going up at a really great rate of knots. At the same time, prices were rising.
Absolutely.
Because normally goes the other way.
Exactly. The anomaly of what happened pre-2000, again, pre-2007, and then 2008 was the Wall Street crash because it started to show cracks in what was happening because the housing, the lenders were giving money to everyone. I remember, I got my license early 2006, and I remember early in my career, people in my office talking about someone telling me, David, I think this is trouble because he helped a guy get a $700,000 home. The guy was telling his gardener about it. The gardener bought the home down the street a week later because he could go and get a loan. And that was an actual true story. So what was happening was, the affordability was out of control, but they were offering two things. They were offering what we called no-nos, which fog a mirror, you get a loan, no income, no asset verification. But the other thing they were doing is they were offering these variable rates because telling everybody this was going to go on forever. And everyone just, they said, hey, don't worry about it. Just get in, get a variable rate. So you were getting, a low 5 or, 4.5% rate, which was ridiculous. No one had ever heard of that. And it was on a 7-year balloon or a 10-year balloon. And they just said, don't worry about it. When the value goes up, and you could just refinance and drop it back down. And so people were being able to get a loan so easily that it didn't matter that prices were going up. There was a whole lot of, it was the origination of FOMO in the States. Nobody wanted to miss out. And so everybody was buying, and that 40% of secondary homes purchased of that 7.1 million in 2005, it just goes to show you how many people were thinking, I'm going to be a real estate investor. It was so many people buying single family homes thinking that this is how they were going to build their empire.
Yeah, so it wasn't second homes to live in, like a holiday house. These were like people buying investment properties, which that typically, do you think that's a big part of the US market? Like just, in Australia, around 30% of properties are owned by investors, I guess, and 30% of transactions, different suburbs is different, much greater percentage or less percentage. But, of your sort of real estate transaction sales, do you know what go to like investors, the people who are buying them just to rent them out rather than to live in them?
25% is where we feel comfortable. Kind of like, we have a bunch of different indicators, 6-month supply with that stupid stat they use, month supply, which is I don't know if you guys use that stat. I hate it because your clients look at you like, what the hell does that mean? It's like, but the 25% is where they like it. But I always tell people, if you're looking at the investor stats too hard, if you are an investor, there's an old investing adage, which is if you're hearing about it, if it's on your freaking TikTok, you're 6 months too late. And Airbnb is blowing up right now. And there are all over Twitter in the last couple of weeks, I've seen thousands of people complaining about how their Airbnbs that were rented for 30 days a month are now no renting at all.
Really?
As the economy changes. I just, when your average Joe jumps in and that goes from 25 to 30% or 40%, like that, there's going to be a lot of people that don't know what they're doing, and they should have been doing it a long time ago. People, were calling me in, the end of 2021 going, yes, this is great. And I'm like, yeah, no, actually, it was January 16th when interest rates were at 2.66, the lowest in history. It was great in January. You missed it. So I'll help you, but be careful.
So, I mean, let's go to the current market now. I mean, because I was watching, like Veronica, I was watching some, information around the US interest rates just a few weeks back, and, looking at their fixed rates, because obviously you got your 30-year mortgages, which is versus like, 80-90% of our loans typically are on variable mortgages, and maybe we fix a little bit when they're really competitive, and then we don't fix any at all, and etc. But in the US, it's kind of the opposite, right? Like pretty much everyone's on a fixed rate mortgage, and what are they like now? Like 7% or something crazy, right? They've gone from 2% to 7% or something, the 30-year mortgages.
2.66 in January of 2022, and then around March, it suddenly, and then so it was like you could get in the threes at the beginning of the year. Then it jumped from 3 to 5 from March to May, and now it's 7.1%. And yes, you are correct. I would say over the last 5 years, when we've been in this real boom time, it's probably 90-95% fixed. The only people using adjustable or variable in any capacity are investors.
Yeah.
So let's dig into that fixed thing, because from my understanding, tell me if I'm wrong, you can fix for the entire length of the loan in America, but you can't here.
30 years.
Wow.
And it's precisely why the investing side in America is so attractive, because it's technically not legal, but if you're 30 or 50 miles outside of where you live and you buy another house, you can call it a second home, and you can put that under a mortgage as though you're buying it, and you can do low down payments. Our government 3.5% and 5% down on a 30-year fixed.
All right. So you could buy it as a second home, and then, after you've signed up to a 30-year mortgage, rent it out as an investment and get Airbnb income and things like that. But you've locked in a home loan rate rather than an investor rate, because you said it was just a second home that you would use on weekends or something like that.
Correct. And probably one of the biggest difference is, and you could, if you had a larger down payment for an investment, typically it jumps from 20 to 30 when you're calling an investment, but you can still get a 30% down. But you can still get a 30-year fixed with 30% down for if it's your fifth or sixth house. Yeah.
And I think with the fixed rates though, like it sounds great, you get this 30-year deal, but that's assuming you live in that property, right? Like I think, we call it mortgage prisoners here, but you almost get like housing prisoners there in the US right now where, let's say you're a starter family, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just sort of hypothetically talking this through, you've bought a little 2-bed cottage because it's your entry point into the market. You've got yourself a 3% fixed rate for 30 years, but the plan was to flip that in 3 years. And now you look at interest rates and they're 7%, and that's 7% a year. So you go, I'm really, really cheap right now in this little 2-bed. For me to go from a 2-bed to a 4-bed, A, it's more money, but B, I've got to go from a 2% mortgage to a 7% mortgage or something like that. And are you finding that that's really, people are getting stuck, maybe because they can't afford to upgrade, A, because of cost, but B, because their mortgage is going to go through the roof.
Yeah, and we are definitely seeing that with, especially now over the past 2 or 3 years, we have this crazy housing shortage and inventory shortage because the 2 to 3 year people, there's no way that they're going to put their home on the market right now because they don't want to jump to that. So, and I think as far as, what you're talking about for the entry level, it really stagnates at a much bigger pace than you would anticipate, because the people who got into a fixed with a low rate probably got just enough information at that time to get in. And when rates go to 5, 6, and 7, they're not savvy enough to understand how to use the adjustable rate. I like the fact that you guys are working with variables early, because your clientele have to have a higher financial acumen going into the deal. I mean, my sales pitch in the States is rents have been out of control for so long. And I just tell them, look, you're freaking out about gas prices. I'm going to lock you in at $5 a gallon for 30 years. How would you like that? And that appeals to a lot of entry level buyers. And so it kind of separates understanding how to use your home as a financial tool, and realizing that you can, I mean, I have people freaking out right now. There's no way I'm going to buy for 7%. That's insane. And I'm like, well, you have two options. You buy at 7% and then it goes up and stays up for 10 years. And you're excited that you're at 7 and not at 8.5, or you buy at 7 and it goes down next year like you're freaking out at me right now, and that's why you don't want to buy. Great. Then you just do a refinance and get into another loan. But people's mindset is so stuck on not being able to, they just don't see ways how to penetrate beyond an interest rate, which is hysterical because my parents bought homes at 18%.
So do you find people stuck in mortgages though? Like, because let's say you're on a 7%, I assume you're seeing some type of repricing of housing and property over there. You don't see a massive increase in the cost of funding without prices getting changed, right? So you're seeing some massive drops in property prices across the country, like in terms of certain pockets.
So bringing it all together, we are seeing an adjustment, but absolutely not massive. In 2008, what we had, this is not going to be a crash. In 2008, we had 600% more inventory. In 2008, the amount of, and then in 2008, everybody was upside down because everybody was buying a home in 2003, 4, and 5. The home equity loans they were giving those out like candy, and everybody was mortgaging their home to the hilt.
Right. Yeah.
And so everybody was upside down. Right now, the average homeowner in America has got like $300,000 worth of equity. So we're not going to see a crash. We're not going to see people reduce prices because people are sitting there not trapped with a 3 or 4% loan, and they don't want to list their houses. So we are not seeing people. So it's this stalemate. And it's going to stay a stalemate. We're just starting to see in the past 6 to 8 weeks here in early November, the beginnings of price reductions. But as I tell people, it's reducing from stupid crazy to now it's just hot. We're not even to normal yet. So we're not seeing massive decreases yet. If 7% stays for 6 months, we might see 5 and 10% off. But our volume's down, but our sales price is still going to finish up for the year.
Fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because you've got like the 30-year mortgage is almost like a real stress test, like a buffer, I guess, for the market, right? Because if you've got everyone who've gone on refinance and got themselves on low rates, not just people who have bought in the last couple of years, it sounds like you can easily refinance to new 30-year loans. There'll probably a refinance boom alongside an investment boom. And so then everyone's just going to say, well, yeah, rates are going up, but I'm on a 30-year deal. Whereas in Australia, you can only really get a fixed rate up to 5 years. And, a lot of people were fixing 2, 3, and 4, 1. And most of our fixed rates are coming off next year. And then we're going to go from, 2, 3% rates to sort of 5s and 6s. And so the Australian sounds like we're in a much worse position there because the whole market's going to get repriced to higher interest rates. But in the US, it's only new transactions. And it sounds like everyone's not selling. So the transaction numbers will be falling. And so, that must make it really hard for the government, though, to control inflation, though, because, if you up interest rates, you will naturally on their people's mortgages. But if you can't up their mortgage expense, how are you going to really slow the economy down because your inflation is a lot stronger than what we've got at problems over here.
Yeah, it's been interesting because I've been watching what's going on in the UK, and seeing the inflation in Turkey, and there's crazy inflation happening all over the place. We're kicking the can down the road. We've had I can't believe I'm saying this. It's almost 20 years of government manipulation of the interest rates. Starting back with our Fed chair way back in the day, a guy named Alan Greenspan, who was the original person who created what we call quantitative easing, and the government was buying mortgage-backed securities. by doing that, it was an artificial way to push things down. I truly believe if we had the 5% or the 5 year, there would just be a lot more conversation and a lot more thought behind what we're doing. And that's why, like, when I found Veronica and you guys having the podcast talking to first home buyers, it was so exciting to me because it went a little more in depth. You guys get when it comes to the financial stuff, and here people can figure out, okay, I just don't want to rent anymore because rents are going so crazy, and then it's a safety net, and they jump in and they stay there, which is precisely why where we're at right now. The other thing that we're not talking about is the fact that we're in a bull stock market, the American stock market now, for age usually 4 years up. We're going on since 2009. So if a stock market crash happens, who knows? But in general, there's going to be a lot of buyers next year. The first time buyer mindset in the States too is they've only been looking at this for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months.
Well, that's the problem with all buyers.
Yeah.
Because all buyers only look in the period of time in which they're looking to buy. They're not observing the entire cycles of markets. So any buyer will think, oh, this is what the property market is like based on what they're experiencing at that time. And so we do like to pull back and say, look, actually, this is all just part of the cycle, particularly here, because obviously we've got that, we've got those shorter cycles of fixed rates, and we've got the much more of immediate impact of changes to the cash rate and variable rates. So therefore the dynamics, I guess, is a little bit more dynamic, perhaps. You said something earlier that I thought was quite interesting. You talked about rents going through the roof, but also the Airbnb market is really tightening markedly because of, are you guys in recession yet, or are you about to go into recession, or however? But
well, the technical definition is 2 quarters in a row where our gross domestic product, it goes negative, and we had 2, but then our third unexpectedly went up. So
okay.
It's probably going to be next year. So the Airbnb thing is interesting. What happened was the Airbnb as a company was trying to, at the end of this big run up, one of the big things they did was they came in and they changed fees and regulations. A lot of people were having problems with cleaning fees and people having parties, and the Generation Z run it. Oh my God, how old can I sound? When Gen Z was getting out there, and 12 of them would take their trip of the lifetime and they'd rent the house and they'd destroy it. And so Airbnb owners were asking for regulation. Oops, you got it. Fees. So now you tack that on with 2 months of or 2 quarters of everyone saying it's bad, it's bad. And now, and the other thing too is that also was becoming when it's on TikTok and 25-year-olds are talking about how much money they made last month, and it's gonna blow up in people's faces, and that's what happened.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. So, like, you've got and when you shut the borders, right, we had to holiday at home. I'm sure Americans traveled around the country more than they ever did. You're quite patriotic over there anyway, so I'm sure you probably did that anyway. But, that would have encouraged, more people using Airbnbs, right? Because they're exploring their own state and their own country versus going overseas, etc. And then you would have saw more people would have listed their properties on Airbnb, right? So there's probably more listings. And then everyone is no longer traveling, right? Because they're worried about their cost of living and their inflation, and maybe that holiday gets, parked, etc. So I think that's going to happen a little bit here as well, actually. You can see the explosion of new listings on Airbnb, and all of a sudden it doesn't make sense. When you look at the Airbnb and the clean fees and all those sort of things, am I really making much more money when the rental market, I could rent it out and rents have gone up? So yeah, you could easily see that sort of shift. I wouldn't mind talking about the, because there's a whole different process around the, buyers agents over there and real estate agents, and like the differentiation. I mean, buyers agents probably do under 1% of the transactions here. Would you say that's probably right, Veronica? Maybe like,
it's a guesstimate at best, because there's absolutely no official figures. So it's been very much less than 5%, that's for sure.
Less than 5%. But in the US, is it like I just don't understand it. What percentage of transactions is there a buyer's agent? Is it not 100%? Is it 90%? I don't know. How does it all work?
Well, I can't imagine why you can't understand it, because here in the States, in US, we call the person who sells the home the listing agent, and we call the person who helps the buyer buy the home the selling agent. So explain to me how that makes any damn sense. The
That's
whole thing
weird,
is,
yeah.
yeah. So anyone who has a real estate license can operate on both sides of the transaction, the buyer side or the seller side.
Right.
In some states, dual agency, as we call it, is actually illegal. And, you know, in my personal opinion, that makes sense because the buyer doesn't have an advocate. The seller was the seller hired the listing agent first. So, you know, who are they going to have? Whose best interest are they going to have? But double ending, as we like to call it, where the listing agent goes out and brings the buyer in, is the end all be all for the wonderful greedy industry that we have out here. In general, buyers agents are, we're seeing a shift. Brokers used to be the hub, and their business model was get as many people as you can to come in and be the big hot agent and have your picture on the bus bench ads. And then people started doing that and realizing I have a ceiling. I can only do so many transactions a year. So now the broker is becoming less and less important, and the team is becoming important. And the team dynamic is I'm the agent, I'm the rainmaker, as they call it. I just do the listings. Let me get this kid who just got their real estate license. You're the buyer's agent. And so for every transaction, you know, the only time you will really see an experienced agent working with a buyer is when they're selling their home and they're moving up. They're buying another. But on most transactions, you know, when we go to list a home, you list a home and you put the lockbox on the front door, and the realtors representing the buyers individually will take them to go see all the homes, and they'll be their representative throughout the transaction.
And then the buyer pays them, do they? Sorry.
No.
So I pay a realtor to take me around lots of different properties, and they go to, they just go to their own properties?
No, the seller pays.
Right.
So what would a standard commission be? So it's 5 or 6%? The sales
6% from the seller's profits of their sale. The seller takes 3% and gives it to their listing agent, and then they offer 3% to the buyer's agent realtors to bring their people and make an offer on the home.
So the buyers don't pay for their own service. And I love this because a lot of people will say to me, oh, you know, it should be like in America because everyone uses a buyer's agent. I mean, yeah, the reason everybody uses a buyer's agent in America is because the buyers aren't paying. It's established that the vendor pays a higher commission rate. Here, honestly, a vendor paying 3% is really unusual now to sell the house. Now you'll get fees sub 2%, right?
Yeah.
Particularly as volumes go down and agents are hungry and they're all a bit starving at the moment, so they will compete on fees, right? So if the vendor in Australia is paying, say, 1.65% commission, that all goes to the sales agent or the listing agent. And what happens here is that we have the team thing as well. So you have the listing agent, the rainmaker with their face on the bus shelter. They've got a team as well. And in their team, we'll have their newbies, their junior associates or whatever they want to call them. And that's what they call the buyer. You know, they're working the buyers. Similar sort of structure, except with a lot less commission in this country. And the buyer's agent is a separate entity who is paid for by the buyer. So the buyer, and this is the reason we've got such a low uptake in Australia for buyer's agents, because buyers think, well, I shouldn't have to pay, you know, I should get this for free. And over in America, though, the vendors, man, they're getting stiffed because they're basically stumping up 6% commission, a lot more money that they're paying out. But also the reality is that nobody's really acting for the buyer. Nobody's really acting for the seller in a way. They're only acting for themselves because we want to get a cut of this money. So
it's an unfortunate system. Yeah, it's an unfortunate system. And the reason, after helping first-time homebuyers myself for 13 years and my wife saying, you're only happy when you work with them. Why are you building this team and doing all this other stuff? The more research I did into the way that America runs it versus the rest of the world, the more I realized that, I don't know how much you guys paid attention to the GameStop thing that happened with the stock market in America.
Yeah.
I'm telling my people, we got about, I'm guessing 7 to 10 years. The online agencies keep trying and keep failing. Zillow and Open Door, and they haven't figured it out. And for me, what I see is the sellers are getting absolutely ripped off, and the buyers right now need to realize what you have in America is golden, and you have the opportunity to have someone represent you for free. Yet, the team leader, instead of sending them LeBron James, or instead of sending them Ronaldo, or instead of sending them another example of someone who plays rugby, because I don't know crap about rugby, then they send them to some weekend warrior dad down at the YMCA. And it's, it's ridiculous. And sooner or later, the sellers are going to start. That's the reason why all the online places in America have been trying so hard. Sellers are thrilled when someone tells them, what are you doing? Why are you paying 6%?
I'm on a personal mission to help more people make better property decisions. And you can find out all about what I'm working on at veronicamorgan.com.au. And there you'll find resources for first home buyers, details about my buyer's agent mentoring program, access to suburb help for investors, or if you're looking to buy your dream home or an investment property in Sydney's inner west, eastern suburbs or lower North Shore, you can connect with my team at Good Deeds Property Buyers. And if you'd like a 30% discount plus free postage for my book Auction Ready, How to Buy Property Even Though You're Scared Shitless, and yes, I'm a potty mouth, use the code ELEPHANT at the checkout. veronicamorgan.com.au.
You're thinking about buying your first home, upgrading to a new one, or purchasing an investment property anywhere in Australia? We would love to carefully guide you through this journey and importantly get the finance right. Please reach out via our website, wealthful.com.au.
Don't forget that you can download our free full or forecaster report. Which experts can you trust to get it right? theelephantintheroom.com.au.
So in Australia, we get a lot of, you said government manipulation of interest rates, but we also get governments manipulating our property market in lots of different ways, how much we can borrow, incentives for first home buyers like grants and stamp duty sort of concessions, government manipulation around sort of zoning. There's lots of ways the government manipulates prices, and ultimately it's to push up prices, right? Because that it makes a wealthier nation and we spend more money. Like that's ultimately the idea. And we get more taxes. So does the government do that at a national level, and then is it a state level where they also manipulate it? Like, do they try to get in there and pumping up prices like they do in Australia, or do they sort of leave it more, would manipulate interest rates rather than manipulate what buyers and sellers are doing?
They work more on the big picture as opposed to the individual things. I'm fascinated when I listen to your first time buyer podcast with the stamp, whatever the heck that is. I need to Google. Yeah, I need to Google it because I'm like, we have first time buyer grants, but with a lot of American government programs, like we heard a lot about Biden's college loan forgiveness. He's going to be something that he's implemented and just got started. They all have a kitty, an amount of money, and when it's gone, it's gone.
Right.
In 2010, they had an $8,000 incentive for first-time buyers because the market was so terrible that you could get a big refund on your taxes. Most of the time, they're short-lived. They run out of money. Some states, and depending on in, like we like to say in America, what color your state is, red or blue, because the red states want no taxes, the blue states want to tax are fine with taxes as long as it's helping people. So there are some state and county, but in general, it sounds like your government manipulation is much more targeted, whereas our government manipulation is truly based on the Fed rate and moving that and then finding other larger services to pump in. There have been multiple talks about first time buyer federal, full state stuff, but they always get shot down.
Gotcha. So what about
Is it-
taxes
it-
though? Like, I mean, the taxes around, like, is there like a capital gains tax exemption? Like, do you have to pay that on your home over there? Like, so do you pay tax if you make a profit on your home? Is that the same as if you had it as an investment property, as in you rented it out? Because that's another way they manipulate the market here. You don't pay any tax if you sell your home. But if you sell an investment property, you pay, 25% tax, let's call it, just to round numbers.
Yeah.
How does it sort of work over there?
We've got this beautiful American tax code called the 1031 exchange. If you sell your personal property, there is a cap. $250,000 for an individual, $500,000 for a married couple is tax-free.
Right.
The 1031 exchange is a manipulation where if you purchase a property and you keep it as a rental, and then you purchase another property of similar or higher price, you can roll 100% of the profit in it and not get taxed on it for that next property. And then you just keep moving it down and down and down and hope and wait that the administration, when you die, gets rid of the estate tax like they did. That was the big thing. It's the estate tax. It's the death tax. It was being called different things by different parties because people were saying, well, that's not fair. The rich people don't even pay. So that's the manipulation that we do on that. So our investors usually roll into another property.
Gotcha. Wow.
And just keep it going. Yeah, the investors out here just talk about it's fine to start with a single family, but rather than buying multiple different single families, just roll in, use the 1031, and just keep getting more and more doors.
That's huge, because one of the things that stops our investors to sell is capital gains tax, right? So we'll get clients, they bought this property and it's a bit of a dud, but it's grown. And if they do have to sell, they've had it for 20 years. Yeah, it's grown, but it hasn't grown massively. But they do have to sell, they'll pay 100 or 200 grand of capital gains tax when they sell. But they just literally could sell that dud, then roll that gain into another property, and then constantly just delay capital gains tax, obviously till death. And then maybe there's inheritance tax and things like that. But on the home, so you can make 500 grand as a couple profit. Yep. You don't pay any capital gains tax. Now, if you make, say, $1 million, what's sort of the tax on that? Do you only pay?
So then you're going to pay the capital gains tax on anything above so in that case, 500 tax free, 500 capital gains tax, and that changes administration to administration.
Yeah.
Sometimes
so let's say 20% or something
tax,
like that, or 30% or something.
Yeah.
But then you could so you make your 500, but then you'd be incentivized to upgrade, wouldn't you? Because you would, because then you get another 500 tax free you can make, right? So whereas here we can
within the cap. So
yeah, you've got to stay there. You've got to stay there
upgrading.
Yeah,
in short jumps.
Yep, you have to live in the property 2 out of the last 5 years, and there are and this is the thing. If you understand the history, and because in 2011 I did a huge seminar talking to people about we have estate planners for the trust, and the guy in January, the big estate planner, he brings in all 1,000 clients and has a guest speaker. So every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, I was guest speaking to 1,000 people, and they were all so scared. And I said, right now is the time to buy. Right now, it's 2011. We've been going down. Go out and buy a condo near our university. You don't have to keep it up. Have you seen a dorm room? It can be a dump, and you're always going to get paid because the parents are paying the rent, not the 18 and 19-year-old kid in there. Not one person wanted to touch it. I said the same thing to contractors. In 2012 and 2013, I was saying, hey, this is what you can do. Buy a dump, live in it for 2 years, and just make it your project. On your weekends, work the house. As the market goes up, after 2 years, sell it, no tax, do it again. And I did have 3 guys that did that, and they did it from 2012 to 2020. Just kept, every 2 years would move, flip it up, no taxes.
Well, it makes sense because 250, property prices, let's say you buy something at 300,000, even making a 250 game as a single would be a massive gain. So you could, realistically flip houses for free. And it sounds like you don't do any type of transaction cost besides the 6% selling cost. Doesn't sound like there's an entry cost like a stamp duty. So as long as you're making more than your 6% transaction cost and making money on the build. I mean, is that really an issue at the moment though with builds? Because in Australia, getting materials, timber, cement, etc., nightmare in terms of price. So it sounds like they are coming back, but also getting labor and tradies basically. Is that similar in the US? You're having a real big issue around the cost of building and getting renovations done.
Yeah. I also just want to clarify, we do have above the 6%, you will have fees. We call them something different, about 1.5% on top of.
All right, 7.5 now. Wow.
So 7.5. 7.5 is total. When I sit down at a presentation with people to talk to them about selling their house, I tell them to take their number that we're guessing, multiply it by 92.5, and then subtract your mortgage. That's how much money you make. So that's a big. Now with investors, a lot of times,
but the costs are on the exit. Then you don't have any costs on the entry.
You as a buyer do have closing costs as well.
Right.
You as the buyer have you don't pay your agent, but you have costs, closing costs, which are probably the most difficult thing to explain to anyone because they are based on things that there's no way to anticipate until you have a closing date. So you'll end up paying, if you pay 3.5 weeks mortgage, or if you pay 5 days mortgage, that's going to be a huge difference to a first-time home buyer. If you have to prepay 6 months of taxes, or if you have to pay 1 month of taxes, and the same thing, and then so that changes a lot. But yeah,
these are just adjustments. Then I mean, we have to do those adjustments when you buy here. Like if the vendor has prepaid 2 months worth of their council rates, for example, then you would adjust for the portion of time that you're going to own the property, that the vendor is no longer going to own the property. So I guess that's what you're talking about there, your adjustments. But they're sort of costs that you would incur in owning the property normally, right? You're going to have to pay those taxes as an owner. So they're not necessarily purchasing costs. They're just additional money that a buyer needs to be aware of. I'm also curious, because we started talking about what happened back in the GFC, in that free and easy lending, and people were borrowing without even having an income, and it's just crazy. So that was like an opportunity seen by very opportunistic financial players to say, hey, we can make money out of this. Now, I'm presuming that the ability to get finance to buy a property in America is no longer quite so free and easy. What has changed? Has the whole industry now been regulated? And how is it different? How when you say now that you're about to go into recession, or you're sort of bouncing in and out of recession, you're saying it won't crash. The property market will not crash like it crashed back in the GFC or the Great Depression, or what'd you call it? Not the Great Depression.
The Great Recession.
Great Recession.
We had the Great Depression in the 30s.
In the 20s.
So they would have had to go Great Depression 2, Electric Boogaloo, but they went Great Recession instead.
So in the Great Recession, so what is fundamentally different structurally that will prevent that happening again?
The strictness of the loans is by far the biggest piece of it. Harking back to The Big Short, subprime, it wasn't just no income, no documentation. It was low credit scores. It was people that were likely to fail.
Right.
That is the biggest difference, is that and that came through government regulation. After the Great Recession, we had something that was formed by the Democrats called the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and they came and dropped government guidelines. Well, what they did is they came and they dropped big fat fines on everybody who did subprime lending, and then the lenders regulated themselves. But when you can go online and you can read and one of the coaching programs for real estate agents that I've been working with since I started, he said this stat back in 2008 that I have never heard anybody talk about since, and it blows my mind. And this is why it's not going to crash right now. The average has $300,000 worth of equity. Equity cures everything. There won't be foreclosures. Home equity lines of credit were created in the States about somewhere in I think it was the mid 80s. And people could go in and use their home as an ATM. If the home had equity, you use your home as collateral and take money out. So from the 80s till the year 2000, it slowly became something that was happening. There were $60 billion worth of home equity lines of credit out in the year 2000. So that took a good 15 years or so. In 2006, there were 626 billion.
Yeah.
So as the market went up and everybody thought this was going to go on forever, there was a mentality that the same reason everybody bought second homes, because they said, just do it. You only make $100 a month in cash flow, but it's going to double by the time we hit 2008. And then, but that many people being that leveraged is one of the big reasons why there were 600% more homes on the market and caused the crash.
So when you say 600%, is that hyperbole or true? 600% increase, 6 times.
Yep.
Wow.
We've got 1.25 million listings. We were hovering around 900,000 homes for sale when everyone was making fun of my social media and telling me I was an idiot and we're going to crash, it's too expensive. And I said, you're half right. It's too expensive, but we're not going to crash because we have 900,000 homes. And when the market was crazy, there were 6 or 7 million homes on the market.
Got it. Yep.
Yeah. Wow. It's a huge difference, right? Like, similar problems in Australia. Like, we've got a very low listing, national listing number. So it does vary across different cities and different pockets, etc., where you're going to get, higher listings and a lot of people running for the hills and everyone just sitting on their hands. But ultimately, we've got very low listings and people are sitting on their hands, and riding out the storm. And so that will protect the market. Just you might not know this, but I mean, what multiple of income, let's say you just do some rough numbers in your head, how much money you can borrow. Do you have any idea of what, so say someone's on 50,000 US, is it, 6 times that they could roughly borrow, like 300,000 US? Do you have any idea on those numbers? Like, is there like a natural multiple that people can put on?
There isn't a natural multiple because the debt to income ratio is 100, is a gigantic part of the equation. So depending on how much debt you have monthly, somebody can making $75,000. One person can qualify for $500,000. One person can qualify for $300,000. I have a lot of clients that have a $700 car payment and they'll have to pay off $10,000 on the car, and now they're $100,000 more. But in general, about 75,000 to get into entry level, 75 to 80,000 if you're free of debt, which is why so many people are freaking out right now, because we hit 408,000 average entry level home median sales price, and the average wages for your 22, 23-year-old trying to get what we call the American dream, move out and buy their house with the picket fence, they're not making $75,000, $80,000 their first year out.
Sounds similar then, because obviously consumer debt, right? Student loans, I'm sure they factor into it, like they do in Australia. We've got something similar. Car loans, credit cards, the all sorts of they probably reduce how much you can borrow, similar to here. But if you wanted to sort of borrow something about 400 or ish, you need income around 75, which is sort of similar. We could borrow 6 or 7 times income. It used to be maybe 10 times income back in 2014. So it was a lot. We had a similar, boom happening in 2012 to 2017. But now it's only 5 times income. So it's really reduced how much people can sort of borrow. I'm just interested around the sale process. Like in the UK, I'm not buying your property unless I sell my other property. And I want you to sign a contract to say that and then I'm not going to and I'm not selling my property until I buy this other property. And so all of a sudden there's this chain. It just goes back to centuries, I think it does. But, Yeah, but it's just stupid in my mind. Like everyone's waiting on someone else, and the things are falling over. And it's like, oh, I didn't buy it in the end because that seller couldn't find something else. And so I just wasted 6 or 12 months of my life, and now I have to start it again. Do you have any of these chain issues over in the US, or is everyone just signing unconditional contracts over there? Like, or is it like 3 months to get your finance ready? Like, what's the natural process with the sale over there?
It absolutely fluctuates with the market. Over the last 3 years, the sellers have been in control and they could ask for whatever they want. The natural solution is what we call a rent back or a lease back. Congratulations, we have a deal. We will close this deal in 30 days and you, Mr. Buyer or Mrs. Buyer, will be the owner of the property, but we're going to stay here for 3 more months. Now, in a normal, usually you try to do it for like a month or two, and usually you'll negotiate it. What's interesting is in a regular market, you negotiate it at the price of the buyer's new loan. They're what we call PITI, the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. So if grandma's been living there for 25 years and she sells the house and her mortgage payment is $800 and the couple comes in with 3.5% down, so they have a full mortgage of almost the full LTV on the property, they're suddenly, if they want to rent back, they're like, if they're the only buyer, they could be like, well, we'll let you stay there, but you now need to pay our $4,200 a month mortgage. So, but then it shifted, and over the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen sellers going, okay, I've got 7 different buyers here. Who's going to let me live here for 3 months for free? That's how the chain has been changed. In a regular flat market, my recommendation to every seller is, do you guys have pods there? They look like the back of semi trucks, and they stick them on your. So imagine the back of the storage unit thing. Yeah. You fill it up.
Yeah, we call them like taxi boxes here. I actually sometimes recommend to clients. We're getting a bit nervous around. Yeah, exactly. Don't worry about storage. Just throw it in this shipping container.
And then they go store it somewhere.
Rent an Airbnb somewhere else that's furnished, and then get the shipping container delivered rather than,
So especially one of those empty Airbnbs that they're having trouble renting it out.
You can get them cheap now. But it's always been a problem, and it's always the sellers try to control the game too much. And I what I tell my folks here, because there is the rent back possibility, but what was funny is people didn't even know about that in 2018, 19, and 20, and then it became a thing again. And so I'm telling my buyers, it's got time and money. Which one do you want to give up?
Yeah.
Gotcha. So, David, I'm sure you got plenty of them, but can you come up with a property Dumbo for us? A story of a buying story or a selling story that's a little story we can learn from?
Well, we have lock boxes here, and so if the listing agent doesn't tell the seller I'm coming by, I will occasionally use the key and go in and see somebody in their robe coming out of the shower. That happened. But I think probably the biggest Dumbo that we see, it's seeing people assume that with their limited amount of knowledge, that they're going to get the best deal for this. And here, the initial negotiation for the price of the home is the first negotiation. We typically, in California, we have 17 days for the buyer beware due diligence period. And there can be 2 rather extensive and costly negotiations that happen within that. After the home inspection, if the buyer finds something in a normal market, that needs to be negotiated. If the appraisal comes in low, that's something that needs to be negotiated because the lender's not only going to pony up a certain amount of money. So the biggest blunders that I've seen is people coming in and saying, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to go to Zillow. This home's worth this. And even though I open up Zillow and I show them on the Zestimates page at the bottom that it says that, they're only within 5%, 60% of the time, and 5%
Cool.
on $400,000 isn't chump change. It's not as funny as walking in on somebody naked, but seeing people go so hard and thinking that it's a car and they're going to get their offer accepted and that they're going to drive off the lot and the deal's over. And then suddenly they find something terrible in the inspection, and the owner is basically like, screw you, pal. You're not, you already ground me down. You grinded my price so hard. You got a low rate. So no, I'm not doing any repairs for you. That's the biggest blunder I see people do.
On the finance side, do you see that it's common that people do get low valuations? Like in Australia, it's not really common. Like, so the bank's really just it's almost a tick the box exercise. It's quite scary, actually. We've made a change where our banks are doing desktop vals. So they're just checking the valuation from their computer. And they're not even paying $250 for an actual person to go and take photos and actually check the property is what it is. And desktop vals are widely off. It's a change that I think the banks are stupid making. They're going down this. It's a to save $200 on $1 million mortgage. It's just crazy. So, but do you see people like buying a property? They get this 17 days or whatever you call it, due diligence period. Then the bank comes in and says, "I know you said 400, but we think it's worth 370, and we're only going to lend 80% on 370." Is that quite common? You get in this negotiation there.
So after the Great Recession, or what did you call it, the GFC?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, after the GFC and the Great Recession, the appraisers got regulated really hard and changed all the rules because what they were doing, because the market was going up so fast, they were saying, it's fine, and the buyers were writing in the offer $50,000 over the $600,000 price. They were writing 650 offers with $50,000 credit back to them. So they were basically money laundering. They were getting a $50,000 cash loan for 5%. So they came in and changed that. And then in changing that, they created a new appraisal management companies. They cut the fees in half. So now the appraisers, God bless the ones who are doing a good job, but they're pointless. They go in and they measure with their tape, and as far as their accuracy, it solely depends on the market. We are just starting to see the beginning of prices adjust. I guarantee you we're going to hear all kinds of combination between people listing their house way too high because Margaret's house in the summer sold for $625 and it was a dump. And so they're going to list it for 700. As soon as these prices go, the appraisers are going to start. We're going to hear a lot of appraisal complaints and whining in 2023. It goes with the market, to answer your question.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yep. They start putting their personal opinion on. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, and it makes me laugh too. You're talking about the Zestimates, the Zillow, these AVMs or automated valuation models, and there's this assumption in a lot of this prop tech space that, well, it's because it's arm's length, it's not the vendor deciding or the buyer deciding, then therefore it's reliable, and everyone's just going to agree with it. And it doesn't actually work that way. If it's a hot market, the vendor's going to say, I don't agree with that. I'm going to get more money for my property. If it's a buyer's market, the buyer's going to say, I can screw the vendor. And it all comes down to human behavior and emotion. And it just makes me laugh. There's so many. And here in Australia, obviously, we've got quite a lot of prop tech businesses, cropping up. Some of them are really elegant in terms of they've identified great problems and are really coming up with very elegant solutions, but a lot of them are very naive, I think, in terms of what the real problem is. And you talked earlier about that the very busy space over there because vendors are paying 6% selling fees, and of course there's a real financial incentive to try to get it out of the realtor's hands onto an app or onto a digital solution. And there's a real much more pressing need or desire, or I guess a imperative for that, whereas here it's not as pressing. There's not as much money at stake, but also this idea that you can digitize to replace the lack of trust that's, when you've got vendors that are greedy and buyers that are also greedy. It's ridiculous.
The Zillow model I could talk about for hours. which was the Silicon Valley based tech company that was the first one to create what they were doing, but they have gone through so many things they are taking money from realtors to advertise on their site, and they've been telling realtors, we're on your side, we're on your side, we're on your side. Oops, last year they got their broker's license, and then they tried it, and they're trying to sell stuff themselves, and then in November they had 400,000 iBuyer homes that weren't selling, and the whole iBuyer program went bankrupt. So there's something to be said about, I was going to say, it scares me, the desktop evaluations and online evaluations. They scare me.
Yeah.
We should do an episode just on that, I reckon. So,
yeah, let's put that on the books. I can't wait.
Right.
Zillow teardown.
Yeah, and I think it's just the prop tech stuff's an interesting thing because I think there's other, not just Zillow, it's Open Door. There's lots of because America is such a big market, right? We're talking 16 times the size of Australia, and as soon as you've got a tech thing, you've got much bigger market to go and play. So let's test it out in the American market, much bigger scope and valuations and etc. You guys have tried so much around the property market that companies in Australia come and try, right? We try to, we had a certain a real low cost. Purple Bricks in the UK was quite successful over there. In Australia, they came and tried here and didn't. Were here only 6 months and had to leave. Anecdotally, sort of, I don't know exactly what the dates were, but yeah, I think it'd be awesome to talk about that stuff because I think it's a lot of people think it's so much easy just to make this amazing tech and it would solve all the problems with the property market, and we see them sort of come and go and fail. The banks tried something similar to that with Zillow, They said, we don't need mortgage brokers. Mortgage brokers are the problem, not us. Let's try to kill the mortgage brokers. And it sort of failed. And then they sort of come back and say, oh, we love you again. And, et cetera. It's so short-sighted, some of these moves. And thanks for kind of enlightening us on the American market. I do think it's wise to think globally and think about things that are working in our favor and things that aren't working in our favor because, it's not all sort of rosy. So thanks for coming on, David.
I hope that we don't create another global crash. Sounds to me like you guys have things a little bit better in control over there with the way that you handle your mortgages. So hopefully you'll do better, and hopefully we don't ruin it for you again. Way to go, America.
If you have a question that you'd like us to answer in an upcoming Q&A episode, you can send us a voicemail or written question via the website, theelephantintheroom.com.au, or you can email us directly at questions@theelephantintheroom.com.au. If you like what you're hearing, please share this episode with others you feel would benefit. And while you're at it, why not leave us an iTunes review? 5 stars would be great. I know that sounds a bit cringy, but we have it on good authority that every review helps make it easier for other people to find out about us and hear what our amazing guests have to say.